Have you ever had this creeping suspicion that a computer is silently making decisions about your workday?
Oh, I think a lot of people are starting to feel that right now.
Yeah, and I don't mean like an automated out-of-office reply or a spam filter. I mean a really sophisticated piece of software that is actively approving your vacation time or, evaluating your minute-by-minute productivity.
Right. Or even deciding if you're next in line for a promotion.
Exactly. It's
What?
wild. It feels a little bit dystopian, honestly.
It is a profound shift in how the modern workplace operates. For a lot of people, the realization that an algorithm might be holding the reins to their career, well, it comes with a very real sense of dread.
Oh, absolutely. So today's deep dive was actually sparked by some fascinating research from Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. He's been tracking this massive, kind of silent shift in the corporate world titled Algorithmic Leadership, Balancing Efficiency and Human Dignity.
And it really is a delicate balance.
Yeah. We are basically moving away from human managers and handing the keys over to the algorithmic boss. So our mission today is to figure out how this technology is reshaping our jobs and, more importantly, how organizations can use this immense computational power without just completely dehumanizing their workforce.
Because that is the real risk here.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because to a lot of people listening, algorithmic leadership probably sounds like some futuristic sci-fi concept.
Yeah.
But Dr. Westover's research makes it crystal clear that this is happening right now. So what is the actual dividing line between regular software and an algorithm that is actually leading?
Yeah, so the line is really drawn at human judgment.
Okay.
When we think of workplace automation, we usually picture physical tasks, like a robotic arm on an assembly line, welding a car door.
Sure. That's repetitive physical labor.
Right. That robot is executing a strictly predefined physical motion. It's replacing human muscle. But algorithmic leadership is fundamentally different because it replaces, or at least augments, cognitive work and decision-making. We're talking about predictive software, making high-level managerial choices about human workers, like who gets assigned to a high-profile project, how to evaluate really nuanced performance metrics, complex shift scheduling, even screening candidates during hiring.
So the algorithm has basically moved from the factory floor and right into the corner office.
Exactly. And its reach is extending at an astonishing rate. The global market for these algorithmic management platforms grew by roughly 15% annually between 2020 and 2023.
Wait, 15% a year. That is a massive retooling of the corporate landscape in a really short window.
It is. And, the COVID-19 pandemic acted as an incredible accelerant for this. Organizations were suddenly faced with massively distributed remote workforces, and they just needed the digital infrastructure to coordinate everything.
That makes sense.
But the critical takeaway from the research is that this is completely broken out of the gig economy.
Yeah, because I think most of us immediately picture the gig worker, right? Like someone driving for a rideshare app or delivering groceries, constantly getting pinged with an optimized route.
And that is certainly the most visible application. But the deployment is everywhere now. I mean, hospitals are relying on complex algorithms to manage intricate nursing schedules.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Major law firms are deploying analytic systems to parse through billable hours and client satisfaction metrics to actually determine partner compensation. And call centers are using real-time speech sentiment analytics.
Wait, what does that actually look like in practice? A computer analyzing speech sentiment.
So the software isn't just transcribing the words you say, it's measuring micropauses, your vocal pitch, the rate of your speech.
That is intense.
It really is. It compares the live conversation against the database of thousands of successful customer interactions. Then it literally flashes prompts on the agent's screen in real time, telling them to, speak slower or show more empathy.
Oh my gosh. It spans everything then. Logistics, financial services, retail.
Virtually every sector is experimenting with this right now.
It reminds me of playing a high-stakes game of Tetris, but with human employees. You're constantly twisting and turning these human beings, trying to perfectly slot everyone into maximum efficiency without leaving a single blank space.
That's a great way to put it.
But, I mean, if we're just optimizing for pure mathematical efficiency, aren't we basically assuming human beings operate exactly like machines? Because we don't. We're inherently messy.
What's fascinating here is that this assumption, the idea that humans can be perfectly mathematically tuned, is exactly where the entire system begins to fracture.
Right.
Dr. Westover refers to this as the optimization paradigm. It's an organizational obsession with treating human performance as an engineering problem that can just be definitively solved.
Like an equation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the governing logic is incredibly seductive to leadership. The thought is, if we can just gather enough data and write a sufficiently sophisticated algorithm, we can eliminate human bias. We can eradicate fatigue. We can solve the chronic inconsistency of human managers.
I mean, I get it. Managers definitely have bad days. They play favorites sometimes. They misread situations. So I can totally see why a CEO looks at a piece of software that promises perfect objectivity and just says, sign me up.
The appeal is obvious, for sure. But historically, leadership has always been defined by judgment. And judgment requires understanding nuance, deploying ethical reasoning, navigating messy interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah, human stuff.
Exactly. When an organization outsources that judgment to a black box algorithm, which is basically a machine learning model weighing thousands of invisible variables that even the programmers can't easily explain, you strip away all that vital human context.
Which really brings up the hidden costs of treating your workforce like a math equation. I mean, clearly companies are adopting these platforms because the numbers look great on the quarterly reports, right?
Oh, the short-term efficiency gains are undeniable. The source material notes that warehouses implementing algorithmic task assignment see an 8 to 15% boost in productivity in just the first year.
8 to 15%.
Yeah. And they achieve that by optimizing routing paths and literally shaving seconds off micromovements. Meanwhile, call centers see a 5 to 12% improvement in resolution times.
Okay, let me put on my ruthless CEO hat for a second here.
Go for it.
If my warehouse throughput jumps by 15%, that is a monumental win for the bottom line. But wait a second. I know the research mentions turnover spikes when you treat people like robots.
It does, yes. Gig platform turnover often exceeds 50%.
Right. And traditional companies see a 10 to 25% spike in turnover after deploying this stuff. So if a warehouse gets 15% faster, but a quarter of their most experienced staff quits out of frustration, aren't the constant recruiting and onboarding costs completely wiping out the algorithm's savings?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the math absolutely starts to collapse when you look past the current fiscal quarter.
Okay, so it is a short-sighted strategy.
Completely. And you are hitting on a concept Dr. Westover calls capability erosion. It goes far beyond just the staggering financial cost of constantly replacing warehouse workers.
Your luck gets eroded, exactly.
Management's ability to actually manage. When algorithmic platforms start making all the day-to-day decisions, who gets which shift, who is underperforming, how tasks are prioritized, the middle managers in that organization literally stop practicing leadership.
Oh, wow. They just become spectators.
Exactly. They spend years just watching a dashboard and blindly approving whatever the AI suggests. They lose the opportunity to develop their own complex problem-solving skills. So when an unprecedented crisis hits something, the algorithm has no historical data to process the AI. Human managers have entirely lost the muscle memory required to lead.
They've basically been reduced to a rubber stamp, so they have no idea how to actually resolve a conflict organically anymore.
Right. And while the manager skills are eroding, the frontline workers are experiencing what the research calls the dehumanization dilemma.
That sounds awful.
It is. When you reduce complex, nuanced human effort down to incredibly narrow data points, you strip workers of their dignity and their autonomy. Just think about all the invisible work you do that makes you a valuable team member, but never, ever shows up on a productivity tracker.
Oh, like mentoring a struggling new hire or calming down a stressed-out colleague.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or navigating an ambiguous project that requires a lot of trial and error.
Right. The algorithm doesn't care that you spent 20 minutes helping the new guy fix a database error. It just logs that your personal output flatlined for 20 minutes and it penalizes you.
And the psychological toll of that environment is severe. The research cites decades of organizational psychology, particularly the work of Deasy and Ryan. They demonstrated that perceived autonomy is a fundamental requirement for intrinsic motivation.
So if you want people to care, they need to feel like they have some control.
Precisely. If you want employees to actually care about the quality of their work, they must feel a sense of agency. When a machine dictates not just what you do, but exactly how and when you do it, down to the literal keystroke, that agency is obliterated.
It's kind of like having a self-driving car that accelerates toward a pedestrian just because its primary directive is to optimize for arrival time. It simply lacks the programming to understand the broader context, and the human variable is completely ignored.
That's a terrifying but very accurate analogy. And that lack of context leads to what the paper calls the amplification of precarity.
Precarity, meaning instability.
Yeah. These systems create profound income volatility for workers because the algorithm constantly adjusts pay rates and task availability based on real-time microfluctuations in demand. And it introduces the constant threat of algorithmic firing.
Algorithmic firing, like a computer just sends you a pink slip.
Yes. A worker can be terminated automatically because their metrics dipped below a threshold for a few days, with absolutely no avenue for a human appeal. Dr. Westover highlights that this disproportionately burdens vulnerable populations.
Because it doesn't see the whole picture.
Right. A standardized algorithm cannot compute the context of, say, a mother needing flexible scheduling for a sick child, or an older worker requiring a physical accommodation.
The algorithm is just entirely blind to the human condition. Okay, so we've established that letting a piece of code act as an unchecked dictator creates a miserable, hollowed-out workforce, but the technology itself is incredibly powerful, and it obviously isn't going away. So what is the practical alternative here? How do we fix this power dynamic?
The solution really lies in a fundamental reframing of the technology. Organizations have to shift from seeing algorithms as tools of control and instead deploy them as collaborative agents.
Collaborative agents.
The research defines this as a hybrid collaboration architecture. It's about intentionally designing workflows that play to the comparative advantages of both the machine and the human.
Break that dynamic down for me. What exactly does the machine bring to the table versus the human?
Well, algorithms are unparalleled at pattern recognition across massive, complex data sets. They can perform mathematical optimization and maintain perfect consistency without ever suffering from decision fatigue.
Right, a computer doesn't need a coffee break.
Exactly. Humans, however, excel at contextual interpretation. We possess empathy. We can navigate highly novel, unprecedented situations that the machine has never been trained on. And crucially, we are capable of ethical reasoning.
The Spotify example in the source material really grounded this concept for me.
Oh yes, that's a perfect example.
Because Spotify uses these incredibly sophisticated machine learning models to cluster millions of data points about users' listening habits, right? The math groups the songs together. But they don't just push that raw algorithmic output to the user. They actually employ human curators to review and contextualize those playlists.
Right. The algorithm spots the underlying mathematical patterns in the audio files, but the human curator understands the emotional vibe of a rainy Tuesday morning breakup playlist. The human injects the cultural understanding.
Yeah, the research also highlighted BMW's manufacturing floor, which kind of takes this into the physical realm.
Yes, BMW utilizes what they call cobots, which are collaborative robots.
Cobots, I love that.
It's clever, right? Rather than attempting to fully automate the assembly line and remove the human entirely, the cobots handle the physically straining, ergonomically difficult, and highly repetitive tasks.
Leaving the nuanced stuff for the humans.
Exactly. This frees up the human workers to focus entirely on quality assessment and complex, bespoke problem-solving that requires dexterity and physical judgment. The technology serves to augment the workers' capabilities, not replace them.
It sounds like having a super smart but incredibly literal assistant. You know, they can read 10,000 spreadsheets in a millisecond and flag every single anomaly. But you, the human, still need to be the one to look at the data and decide what it actually means for your team. The algorithm advises, but the human decides.
That is the exact dynamic we need. We see the life-saving potential of this in medical diagnostics, too. An AI system analyzing X-rays, paired with a human doctor, significantly outperforms either the AI working in isolation or the doctor working in isolation.
Wow, the combination is better than the parts.
By far. The AI detects the microscopic hidden pattern in the imaging, but the doctor contextualizes that finding with the patient's lifestyle, their medical history, and their emotional state.
This raises an important question, though. How do you actually hardwire that kind of collaboration into an office environment or a call center?
This raises an important question about structural system design. You have to build what the research calls escalation pathways.
Escalation pathways.
You program the system so the algorithm handles the high-volume, routine, mundane decisions. But the system must be explicitly designed to recognize its own limitations. The moment a situation becomes unusual, high stakes, or highly nuanced, the workflow automatically escalates the decision to a human manager.
Oh, I see. So if an employee's output suddenly drops because of a known supply chain bottleneck that the algorithm isn't tracking, the system flags the drop, but a human manager intercepts it and says, hold on, we know the parts didn't arrive off the truck today. No one is getting penalized for this.
Exactly. The human provides that vital interpretive layer. They act as the shock absorber between the rigid math and the messy reality.
I love that phrase, shock absorber. But look, if I'm an employee who has been burned by these surveillance systems in the past, I'm not going to suddenly trust it just because upper management rebrands it as a, collaborative agent. There is a massive trust deficit here.
And rightfully so.
Yeah. So how does an organization actually rebuild trust between an employee and a line of code?
Bridging that deficit relies on two foundational pillars: transparency and procedural justice. If you want a workforce to accept algorithmic integration, the organization has to prioritize preserving human dignity with the exact same rigor they apply to efficiency metrics.
Transparency is a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot, though. What does it actually look like in the context of algorithmic management?
It means aggressively eliminating the black box.
Oh.
Microsoft confronted this exact hurdle when they rolled out their workplace analytics. Instead of quietly monitoring activity in the background, they completely flipped the script.
What did they do?
They openly educated their employees on exactly what data points were being logged and how the models analyzed that data. And crucially, they built anonymization directly into the architecture. The data is only aggregated at the broader team level, guaranteeing it cannot be weaponized for individual surveillance.
Okay, yeah, that immediately de-escalates the tension. You remove the paranoia of the all-seeing eye.
Exactly. And a hospital network, featured in the research, provides another really powerful example regarding their shift scheduling algorithm. They didn't just alter the software, they altered the interface.
How so?
They created a dashboard that showed the nurses exactly how the algorithm calculated their upcoming schedule.
Oh.
It displayed the underlying math. The algorithm weighed the current patient acuity requirements, cross-referenced it with the specialized certifications of the available staff, factored in fatigue levels from previous shifts, and then attempted to match the nurse's stated preferences.
So instead of a mysterious schedule just magically appearing in your inbox, the system explains its logic. Like, you got the Tuesday overnight shift because we have a surge in cardiac patients and you're the only available certified cardiac nurse.
Yes, and that transparency changed everything. Just by showing its work, the hospital saw scheduling-related grievances plummet by 35%.
35%? That's huge.
Psychology tells us that people are vastly more willing to accept a demanding or unfavorable decision if they can clearly understand the rational mechanics behind it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, specifically regarding the psychology of the worker. The source discussed Upwork, the massive freelance marketplace. Because this is the ultimate gig economy environment, right? Every interaction is entirely mediated by algorithms. And they faced a massive backlash over automated account suspension.
It was a huge problem. Freelancers were waking up to find their entire livelihood frozen by a bot just because they tripped a keyword filter or their response time dipped. The psychological terror of being locked out by a machine with no recourse is immense.
Exactly. So Upwork introduces this remarkably simple fix: a structured appeal process. They guaranteed that if an algorithm flagged your account, a human being would review the suspension within 48 hours. And by simply introducing that human review mechanism, contractor retention and satisfaction skyrocketed.
It perfectly illustrates the concept of procedural justice. The data reveals a profound truth about human nature here. Having the opportunity for a fair appeal, the psychological need to simply be heard, often matters more to a person than the actual outcome of the dispute.
Really?
Yeah.
Even if they still get suspended?
Even then, if the human reviewer investigates and concludes, actually the algorithm was correct, you violated the terms of service, the freelancer still feels fundamentally respected because their case was evaluated by a person with empathy, not summarily dismissed by a line of code.
It basically transforms the interaction from a dictation into a conversation.
Exactly. And we are seeing this conversational approach revolutionize traditional performance reviews as well. IBM completely overhauled how they use algorithmic data. They track a massive array of metrics: productivity, skill acquisition, collaborative network mapping.
Sounds like a lot of data.
It is. But the algorithm is explicitly forbidden from generating the final evaluation score. Human managers are trained to treat the algorithmic output purely as a conversation starter.
Oh, I like that. That reframes the entire dynamic. The data point isn't the final verdict, it's just the opening premise. The manager is required to sit down, look at the human context, consider external factors the algorithm can't see, and then calibrate the raw data against reality.
And that human calibration is what preserves dignity. The most resilient organizations recognize that algorithmic leadership isn't something you can just purchase and install. It requires what we call adaptive governance.
Adaptive governance.
The city of Amsterdam is actually pioneering this. They deploy algorithmic decision systems for municipal services, but they mandate public reporting standards and have established citizen advisory boards. They actively bring the people who will be governed by the algorithms into the design and oversight process.
That's incredible. The research also mentioned AT&T and Deloitte investing heavily in algorithmic literacy programs. They are actually pulling back the curtain and teaching their employees how these models work.
Right. They're training their workforce on the basics of data analytics, how machine learning generates insights, and most importantly, how to spot the inherent biases and limitations of those models. By demystifying the black box, they actively reduce the power asymmetry.
So the algorithm is demoted from a terrifying digital boss to a powerful tool the worker actually knows how to wield. It really proves that this isn't just an IT upgrade, is it? Algorithmic leadership is a massive socio-technical challenge. The evidence Dr. Westover presents makes it clear that we do not have to choose between technological progress and human flourishing.
We really don't.
We don't have to surrender to the optimization paradigm. We can achieve incredible efficiency while maintaining human dignity. But it requires intentional, human-centered design.
And it demands deliberate, sustained effort from leadership. Organizations have to construct those escalation pathways, enforce transparency, and guarantee human oversight, even if inserting that human friction slightly slows down the system's absolute maximum velocity. Because the alternative is a hollowed-out, deeply cynical organization bleeding talent.
So what does this all mean for you as you head back to work today? I think the most immediate application is to take a hard look at the digital tools operating in your own workspace. Are the dashboards, the analytics trackers, and the scheduling apps designed to augment your professional judgment, or are they slowly being positioned to replace your judgment entirely?
It's a critical question. Are they acting as conversation starters, or are they handing down final verdicts?
Exactly. And it leaves us with one final kind of provocative thought to chew on. Dr. Westover's research briefly touches on the concept of graceful degradation. It's this engineering principle that a system must be designed to fail safely.
Right.
If the technology suddenly goes offline, what happens to the organization? If we fully surrender our organizational steering wheels to these brilliant, optimized dashboards and human managers spend a decade just blindly approving what the AI suggests, what happens to our interpersonal muscle memory? If the system crashes or faces a completely unprecedented crisis, will there be a generation of leaders left who actually remember how to read a room, show empathy, and organically manage other human beings?
It is a chilling scenario. If we allow those vital human muscles to atrophy in the name of perfect mathematical efficiency, the short-term gains just won't be enough to save us.
Something to think deeply about the next time you log in. Keep an eye on the algorithms operating in your life and make sure you are still the one doing the leading. We'll see you on the next deep dive.